Welcome to this week's video. Now, I think I left a message. I hope people got it, that I had wisdom teeth out. So I'm not doing a face to camera video. It all went fine, but I just thought I'd give myself a rest. Also, I was checking out the calendar and noticed that this week contains Shakespeare's birthday. So I thought, why not just do something along those lines? But before we start, remember there is our shop where we have books and writing services. There is also our Redbubble shop with over 100 designs if you'd like to support us there. If you'd like to support us without spending any money, that's fine. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. It's always worth it. So, for most people, their first encounter with Shakespeare is usually on film. Generally, the language is quite dense for younger readers to read. You might get it at school and have to read your way through, but I honestly, personally, I don't think the best way to encounter Shakespeare is through reading him off a page. I think he is best heard in performance, whether that is film or whether that is stage or whether that is recorded stage. And so for most people who really like Shakespeare, not just who slogged through it at school, the place where they found it was film. And the 20th century, for the whole of the 20th century, has been rather interested in putting Shakespeare on film, starting in 1899. And what it does is it takes, these are trying to create images that are going to be iconic enough to stand in, so that somebody understands, because there is no film grammar yet, because we are using one very wide shot, we are having to pick elements of the play that hopefully, they're hoping, fingers crossed hoping, that you would understand it. So Richard III has the wooing of Anne, which has some striking visual details in it that make it different from any of the other elements of the history play, any of the history plays. This is one where you really start to see, this is Hamlet and the ghost. Now, it was very nice to have put the ghost in as a negative superimposure. That's quite cool to give that ghostly quality. But without knowing Hamlet, this makes no sense. Visually, it is very, very boring. And I would wonder how well you would be able to read what is going on and understand what is going on from these clips if you were not told what they were. So, if I'm told this is to be or not to be, then okay, it's to be or not to be. But if I'm not told this is to be or not to be, is this to be or not to be? If I'm just told this is Shakespeare, this could be Brutus. The power of the image is not really fully explored at this point. Now, this one, you see some woeful editing. Gertrude at the beginning of that clip and Gertrude in the next moment, which is supposed to be continuous, completely shifts place. Also, the framing is ghastly. Hamlet is all the way over in the corner and almost unseeable. These are very, very short too, because it wasn't until you get D.W. Griffith and A Birth of a Nation, odious as that film was, although there are other filmmakers who were starting to explore the subtleties of film grammar, but it really is Birth of a Nation which proved that, people will sit in a theatre for a long period if you have a coherent narrative. So that is quite an interesting element to that. Now, this is an Ernst Lubitsch film. This is called Romeo and Juliet in the Snow. And instantly, this is 10 years later, and instantly you can see there is film grammar here. This is our meet cute between Romeo and Juliet. We are cutting back and forth. We have performances that are actually subtler. Not that this is a subtle one, this is a comedy. This is one of Lubitsch's comedies. Lubitsch was a German director, writer, producer, actor who went to America for obvious reasons, and did a lot of musicals in the 30s. And one thing, I've been watching Billy Wilder films, and one thing Billy Wilder said is whenever he got stuck on a directing problem, he would think, what would Lubitsch do? Now, this story is a Romeo and Juliet story in Bavaria. Romeo has come back. Their families are rivals. They're always in court. And he meets and falls in love with Juliet. Of course, this being a comedy, it's going to end happily, but we are going to hit the beats of Romeo and Juliet. There is a Paris, and he's a dull boy that Juliet doesn't want to marry, and her father does. One of the big differences, well, we have here the balcony scene, him coming into her bedroom, which is very, very sweet. And if you think you recognize Romeo, that's probably because he is Thomas Hutter in Nosferatu. Same actor. You start to, when you watch a lot of films, you do start to see the same actors being used over and over again, obviously, because they're in lots of different films. Whereas a lot of his fellow actors moved west when the Nazis came to power, to England or to America, he was a committed communist. And so unlike other members of the film industry who had to flee, he also had to flee, but he fled east to Stalin's Russia in the 30s. And you just think, wow, that is commitment to a cause. But it seems a bit like out of the frying pan into the fire. He did survive it, and he ended up in East Berlin after the war. So there you go. This one creates the comedy through that intercutting. That's the Paris. The overly tragic Romeo and Juliet, the heightened performances. Why are they heightened? Because it's comedy. They're meant to look overly tragic. One of the things I noticed is I think Murnau has a particular style, because the acting style in this is different, and I've seen another Murnau film, and I will talk about this another time. I think Murnau has a particular style which he uses in Nosferatu, or how he wants his actors to act. Because this is quite different again. This is very heightened, but it's supposed to be heightened. It's to emphasize the silliness of the situation and how overwrought they are. But you have the film grammar much, much stronger. And because the film grammar is much, much stronger, this had no English intertitles. Like, none. It was hard to read. I don't read German, so I wasn't reading the intertitles for this. But because the film is made with appropriate grammar, I can follow what's happening. A good silent film should be followable. It should not be difficult to understand what's happening in the film as you're watching it. If you can't understand what's happening in the film as you're watching it, then that is in part a problem with the film. because it shouldn't be difficult to understand what's going on. Now, this, of course, is Our Hospitality, which, if I was only allowed to have 3 Buster Keaton films, it would be this one, The General, and Battling Butler. That's how much I like this one. Again, we have a Romeo and Juliet story, this time in the Deep South with feuding families, and we have our meet cute between Willie McKay and Virginia Canfield on the train down south, him going down for his inheritance and her returning home from a visit. So we have our Romeo and Juliet setup, and of course, again, being a comedy, hilarity will ensue. Now, you will notice, watching Our Hospitality, that Buster shoots fairly wide. And he shoots fairly wide for a reason. It's very deliberate. So, although those early pieces were shooting wide, purely because no one thought to not shoot wide, Buster shoots wide, not exclusively, because here we have mid-shots, but he avoided close-ups unless it was on a specific theme. You will sometimes get close-ups on, in the Navigator, you get the hands shuffling the cards. But Buster shot wide or mid-shots because once you get into close-up, it starts to turn the comedy into a tragedy. It's funny watching someone fall down from a distance. If you're up close in their face, not so funny. You get more of that pathos coming through. Also, Buster liked to move things. And again, we have a train. So, trains are a big thing. Big thing for Buster. But he's got the camera moving. He hasn't used Carl Freund's unlocked camera or unchained camera. Carl Freund being the cinematographer who famously picked up the camera and moved it around. And if you want to see some amazing camera work, have a look at Abel Gantz's Napoleon. That is spectacular. But Carl Freund is the one who first moved the camera. Now, Buster doesn't so much move the camera because he generally has fairly static shots because he's trying to get the stunt. But what he does is he creates movement through editing. And Buster's editing is something that is beautiful to behold, and you don't realize how beautiful his editing is until you watch some other stuff. And then you realize, oh wow, there is some bad, ugly editing out there. But Buster's editing is beautiful because you don't notice it. And you don't feel, even though these are wide shots where the camera generally doesn't move, you don't feel that the camera isn't moving because the movement is created through the edits and the image is generally so dynamic. If you are interested in getting into silent film, absolutely go to the 20s, because the 20s is where you get the film grammar starting to work and be intelligible and be able to tell those stories. If you can watch these films without the intertitles, which I did for the Student of Prague, the intertitles were either German or Russian, and still understand it, then the filmmaker has done the right job. Watching silent films will change how you watch films. Watching silent Shakespeare is a curiosity rather than an experience. It is not really something that can properly exist before the 30s, before sound comes in. Of course, once the 30s come in with the sound, a lot of the images become more static, so you win some, you lose some. So that's it from me. Her Infernal Majesty will be here next week with a play. I hope you enjoyed this and have a lovely week. Bye-bye. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.